The Mouse in the House of Swiss Cheese. One day a man was coming out of his house, and he noticed next to his house there was a small little structure made of cheese. As he was watching, a little mouse came out and went to his little mailbox and got some mail. Now the man was slightly fascinated because not only had he never seen a mouse with a house of cheese before, but he had never seen a creature that was so bundled up. This mouse was bundled up like he was dressed for the snow. He had a very heavy coat on with big, thick boots. He was obviously quite cold. His teeth were chattering. He was holding his limbs together and was brushing his hands together and trying to warm them up. And so the man kneels down to the mouse and he talks to him for a little bit about how he's doing and how he got to be there. And then he asks the mouse why he made his house of cheese. He's obviously quite cold and not enjoying himself, and it would be a whole lot easier for him if his house was made of something a bit more weatherproof. And the mouse gets upset, and he says,
How dare you? My family has been building mouse houses out of cheese for many generations. That's an insult.
and he storms off back into his house. The man feels rather perturbed, but he goes back into his house and goes about his business, not making a big deal out of the problems of a little mouse, accepting that the mouse does what he feels like doing, and that's okay. Well, over the course of the beginning winter, things get colder and colder, and he goes outside one day and he finds the mouse collapsed out by his mailbox. He tries to talk to the mouse doesn't respond. He tries to nudge the mouse with his finger. The mouse still doesn't respond. So at this point, he's concerned for his health. So he brings the mouse inside, carefully cupping it in his hand, takes it over by the fire, and lays it down softly and tenderly, and finds a handkerchief and wraps the little mouse in his handkerchief like a small blanket, and allows the mouse to get warm. It takes a while, but after a few hours, the mouse awakens, and he talks to the mouse, and he offers him the opportunity to stay in the house for a while and be warm and not have to worry about how cold it is in his house. And the mouse reluctantly accepts, admitting that it had gotten a bit too cold for him, and he was not doing well. So the man sets up a little makeshift house for him with a box, and cuts a hole in it for a door, and he helps the mouse set up a little makeshift house and get some of his belongings out of his cheese house, and makes him comfy and gives him some food and water, and the mouse stays with him for the winter. He comes to appreciate the situation and what the man has done for him. But as things warm up, he forgets the benefits that he was experiencing with the house, and he starts to become irritable. He starts to complain that the human is too loud and his house shakes when the man walks through. He accuses the man of stomping when the man's not doing anything different than he normally does. It's just a wooden floor, and so it creaks and vibrates when the man walks around, and that's the nature of the house that he is living in. He tries to explain this to the mouse, but the mouse doesn't care, doesn't understand, and doesn't care to understand. He's just unhappy with what he's experiencing. And so the human finally sighs and says, okay, well, it's up to you whether you want to stay in here. I've enjoyed your company, and I've done my best to give you a comfortable, healthier place to live. But if you don't like it, you can go back to your house of cheese. Nobody's stopping you. Nobody's making you live here. It's completely up to you. And the mouse sighs and thinks about the comfort that he has enjoyed and decides that he will stay. But the next week, he finds something else to complain about. The man has company over, and that makes noise. And he talks on the phone, and that makes noise. And he complains again about what he's experiencing living in the environment with the man. And the man tries to talk to him about it, and the mouse accuses him of yelling and being overbearing. When he's talking normally, it's just a little loud for the mouse because the mouse is tiny, and yet he has good hearing. But the mouse is being more and more sensitive and overreactive, and the human can't reason with him. So this kind of thing goes on off and on for a few weeks, and finally the mouse gets irritable enough to decide that he's going to go move back to his house of cheese. And so the man is sad to lose the mouse's company, but he helps the mouse anyways. He cares about the mouse. He likes the mouse, so he helps him out, and he helps him get his things back into his little house of cheese and rebuild the damage that was done by the winter, and helps him fix his house up and get it in order and organized, and asks the mouse if he wants help making a more sturdy house. And the mouse goes back to his old spiel about how previous generations have lived in houses of cheese for a long, long time, and he'll be fine. And the man asks him, if they've been doing it for generations, why is it not safe for him? Why did he collapse? And the mouse explains that he just hadn't learned to adapt yet. He was from a different city, and that city burned down, and so he had to move here. And the man tries to explain to him that the place that he moved from was obviously a very different place with very different weather, and as this last winter proved, it wasn't healthy for him. It wasn't working. The traditions that he was holding on to from his past obviously didn't work here. But the mouse got upset and defensive and chewed him out in his little mouse voice again. And so the man shook his head and sadly walked back into the house. And he talked to the mouse occasionally, coming and going as usual. And they were able to get along okay. But then winter came again. And this time it was faster and it was more powerful. And despite the fact that the mouse had tried to get materials together to insulate the inside of his house and cover some of the holes, it wasn't enough. One day the man realized that he hadn't seen the mouse for a few days. And so he went out and called to the mouse, and the mouse didn't respond. And he thought, well, maybe the mouse is just sleeping. Maybe he's tired and cold and had gone to sleep. So the next day he comes out again and tries to talk to the mouse. He doesn't see the mouse during his usual time. He doesn't see him getting the mail at his usual time. And so he decides that he's going to risk further upset. And he tries to lift a corner of the house without breaking it, which doesn't work. The house at this point has been brutalized by the weather, and the piece breaks off as he tries to bend it and peek in. But it doesn't really matter because he finds that the mouse is laying there dead. When he tries to nudge the mouse after he doesn't respond to verbal communication, and he tries to nudge it with his finger, he finds that the body is cold and stiff and hard and rolls around like it's made of wood. Limbs stay in place when he tries to move the mouse, and he realizes that the mouse is dead. And so the man cries and he buries the mouse in his backyard. He decorates the spot with little flowers, and he laments that the mouse didn't listen and didn't understand, and he lost a friend. I relay this story to help you understand what it's like to try to help people and have them not listen to you and not understand, and be too stuck in what they believe and their traditions to realize how detrimental what they're doing is, and watch them slowly hurt and destroy themselves and even die for what they believe in mistakenly and do not understand. I've experienced this many times in my life, and I've come to understand how it works and different ways of approaching the situation, but some people just do not want to admit that what they believe isn't right and isn't beneficial, and that they're hurting themselves and that they are deteriorating. And eventually, some people die without learning that lesson, without being willing to admit that maybe they're wrong. Maybe what they're doing is hurting them. We all hear about people who live in abusive relationships, and some people end up getting killed before they learn that lesson and get away from the harm. And some people do not take care of their health, do not learn how to eat healthy, exercise, and take care of themselves, and they too die. I have recently lost both my uncle and an elderly friend that I tried to help and who refused to listen. And in both cases, I could have saved them. But they didn't follow through, even when some of them, and I'm talking beyond just these two examples, I've lost various people in various different ways, both to health issues and to other things. But I've had this problem, as most people do, numerous times in my life. Lost friends, lost romantic partners, because people get defensive and don't want to admit when they're mistaken. And they make a big deal out of it instead of being honest enough to have a conversation about the facts and what is very blatantly detrimental and what has been proven wrong that they believe in, and reevaluate the facts and be open to looking at a healthier, more beneficial way of doing things. And I'm going to use this in my classes because I haven't found a better way to give people a universal example that everybody can understand, even children. I hope you've enjoyed and learned something from this story, and I hope that you are honest and responsible enough to really look at your life and ask yourself, am I holding on to beliefs for the wrong reasons, which are detrimental? Am I hurting myself? Am I destroying myself in this process? Just because I'm too attached to what I believe and unwilling to question that, holding on to traditions that may no longer serve me because things have changed and I haven't been willing to admit that. I've seen it ruin relationships of many kinds. We all go through it. Everybody I know has gone through it numerous times. And misconception and assumption and false accusation have led to the destruction of many kinds of relationships throughout my life and the lives of those that I know and those that I teach and serve as a counselor and therapist and life coach. And so I ask you, for your own sake, because I care. I care about each and every one of you. I ask you to be honest with yourself, to look at what you believe and how you live honestly, and look at the pain and suffering and harm that you experience, and ask yourself, why am I experiencing this? Are there things that I am choosing to do or choosing to allow that are detrimental, that are harmful, that may even be killing me? And am I holding on to it for the wrong reasons? Because it might save a friendship, it might save a relationship, it might even save a life. To be honest about such things. I wish you happiness, peace, and a truly fulfilling life. Thank you for listening.